So we're on camera now. As you can see, I went and got a haircut, and then we got prepared for this. That was a joke. First joke dies on the camera. I'll edit that out. So we're beginning now chapter 3, and this is an easy and a useful chapter, one that is applicable perhaps to all of your classes. What we're focused on here is clear thinking, critical thinking, and clear writing. Clear writing, how to write clearly. And gee, how many classes can that apply to? Just about everything. And there's also some funny stuff in here, so I want to have a good time. Unclear thinking, let's consider an example. They say that the money we had promised 3 years ago to be new money this year is not new money. We have not paid it yet, and it is old money versus new money. For me, new money is new money. If paying in $5 or $10, it's the same money. What the heck is this guy talking about?
Money.
That's about it. What is he saying about it? Hard to follow. And there are a lot of people on cable news that just go on, and there is no real clarity to what they're saying. And some people, literally, they'll just run their mouth. And it's not like organized thoughts are coming out. And we, in order to be not only persuasive, but to develop a valid, logical, sound argument, you can't be talking like this. You need to be clear. And sometimes being clear is not so easy. For example, let's say, did the 49ers lose?
Yeah,
they did. So the 49ers, I don't know if you would call it an upset. Who were they playing?
Cowboys.
It was not an... Well, what a game. I saw that. Tony Romo came back with a bruised, broken, bruised, tough guy. So if I say the 49ers are upset, what are the at least 2 ways you can interpret that?
They lost.
They lost, number one.
But the team's like unhappy.
They are pissed off. Yeah. First thing I'll edit out. So you can, this is an ambiguous phrase. The 49ers are upset. Now, quite frankly, amongst guys who just watch the game, it might be clear. But if you just say it in general discourse, there are at least 2 ways that you can interpret it. So that would be an example of an unclear statement as well. So what the authors in this chapter talk about are some sources of a lack of clarity, of ambiguity, and here 4 sources of confusion. First, excessive vagueness, and we'll talk about this in more detail. Ambiguity, excessive generality, and undefined terms. These are kind of the 4 areas that we'll be focusing on in order to improve the clarity of our thinking. First, vagueness. What do we mean by saying that something is vague? Anybody want to take a crack at that? Yes, sir.
It's too general, too broad.
We're actually going to talk about generality in a little bit. They have something more precise in mind here. What they're thinking about is a word or phrase that has a group of things to which it applies, and there are some borderline cases, things that might be considered in the concept or might not. And so here we have a group of things to which the word or phrase refers, and there are borderline cases where it's difficult to determine whether they're in the group or outside of the group. Caleb?
What does Captain Picard have to do with waterboard?
In all due time, Caleb. In all due time. So first example we look at, having to do with Captain Picard, would be the word bald. We might say that he is bald. But are there not some borderline cases?
Yeah.
What about the guy who shaves his head? I could grow hair if I wanted, and I do have some here or there. Clearly, there are going to be some cases where you could say it's a borderline. Is this person bald or not? So we have a group to which the word or phrase refers, But we have certain cases where it's difficult to determine whether they're in the group or outside the group. For example, my friend Caleb, what is cruel and unusual punishment?
Torture.
Boy, that settles it. Why didn't you put it right up there? Here, cruel and unusual. What the heck does that mean? You know, that's in the Constitution, and we're trusting the Supreme Court to interpret it. But quite frankly, I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, you know, is it not? And, you know, we have considered hanging, you know, shooting with a gun. These were all considered acceptable according to this standard before, and now we feel a little bit differently about them. And of course, with the case of waterboarding, there is a vice president that goes on TV today, and he'll justify waterboarding as not being torture and implicitly not being cruel and unusual punishment. I saw a radio announcer. No, it was that guy from cable news on CNN, and he's not there anymore. I forget the guy's name, but he went under waterboarding himself to see whether he felt it was torture. And apparently he had been taught, you know, water, it can't be that difficult, you know, not a big thing, you know. And they get him under for like 2 seconds, and yes, he's freaking out, man. And it's torture, it's torture, it's torture. Yeah.
That was on Keith Olbermann.
Keith, I'm sure, had played a clip of that probably numerous times.
That was like a former district attorney for the Bush administration or something. It was very high ranking. Like, he studied law. He was, you know, no one ever accused him of not being a patriot. You know, it was definitely, he was one of theirs. You know, and he bravely
saw the light
bravely underwent waterboarding. Told him not to stop, even you know
for like 2 seconds.
Right. Well, yeah, but he said that he was he knew that they wouldn't let him die, but yet his body was convinced that without a doubt he was going to die. He was he knew he was going to die.
I've been waterboarded.
Have you?
Yeah, I used to work for the Department of Defense in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And it's like CI training, counterintelligence training. They make you do all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's kind of crazy. It's pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy. Now, would crazy count as cruel and unusual? That's
I mean, I think they were going easy on us a little bit, not pouring too much water. Because I could get side breaths. And I was just
cheating. Yeah. Side breath.
And then there's someone talking in your ear, it's all think, use your brain, are you really drowning, are you really drowning?
So coaching.
Yeah, coaching, yeah. Because if you ever get captured, translated, I was a translator in Afghanistan, and if you ever get captured or something, they want information out of you, they coach you how to go through it or stuff like that.
Interesting.
Wait, do they just lay you down and throw water on your face?
Well, they lay you down and put this cloth over your face, as I understand it, and then they pour water on that cloth.
That makes it seem like you're Jake Duncan.
What's that?
Isn't it supposed to make you seem like you're getting drowned?
Yeah. That's kind of the intent.
It feels like water's all over your face, and your head's submerged or something. Yeah, even it feels like your whole body's wet too.
See, we have somebody in this class who's actually undergone it. You know, in diversity.
We went into it giggling, so we were all right, we're gonna get waterboarded.
Were you giggling after?
No, actually, I was kind of winded after.
Do you approve of waterboarding as an interrogation?
I mean, you're not gonna get facts out of it. You're gonna get something, but who knows what it is.
Do you think it's ethical?
Ethical?
Well, that's dangerous territory.
I don't know.
But interesting how many will argue that after that kind of treatment, you'll say anything to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine waterboarding where you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that would freak me out. I knew what was going on. I knew going into it what was happening.
Right.
I knew I had a coach next to me.
You'll make it. You'll be all right. I wonder what the coach is saying to the real people being interrogated. Yeah. Tell me, man, he's going to never stop, man. I don't know. This guy's freaky.
They're all ex-Navy SEAL, Vietnam, jumping out of chopper guys. Those guys raise kill a guy with a chopstick kind of guy. In 10 different ways. Those guys are how to get in your head and make you kill yourself. That's kind of
I'm not going to kill you right away.
Yeah.
I got different ways. So, our point here is that there are many words or phrases that are vague in the sense that They'll refer to a category, but there'll be cases that are borderline, that can be considered in the group or outside the group, and we can't really narrow down whether they're in or out. Baldness and cruel and unusual punishment being a couple examples. Now, vagueness occurs to varying degrees all the time, and quite frankly, we can't do without it. If we made everything we say specific enough so that it couldn't be interpreted any other way, we'd bore the heck out of each other, because we'd be so specific. So we say things, Butte City is a small town. Well, compared to what? If you really get into it, this is a vague phrase. But if I'm in a conversation and I'm talking with my friend who lives just outside Butte City, Butte City is a small town. Well, that vague phrase will have enough clarity to be meaningful in this context in which it is used. So we need to be honest that we can't do without vagueness. It's always going to be there. But vagueness can become a problem if it is excessive and if it relates to fundamental terms like cruel and unusual punishment, for example. Too much vagueness can be a problem, and so that's one of the things we want to try to avoid. Vague words or phrases that refer to a group of things that have borderline cases where you don't know if they're inside or outside the group. Ambiguous. Ambiguity is when a word or phrase or sentence is ambiguous if it can be interpreted as having more than one meaning. Jessica is renting her house. How can we interpret that in more than one way? Yes, sir.
She's either living there and paying rent to live there, or she's charging someone else to live in her house.
Correct. She could be paying rent herself to live in this place, or this house, or she could own the house and be renting it out to other people. And this phrase, this sentence, does not clearly distinguish which interpretation is being used. Does everybody see that?
Yeah. And what to do to make it clear?
What's that?
What to do to make it clear? To give the sense of what you are talking about?
Usually we're going to have to replace the word or phrase or add some words to it so that we, in this case, distinguish between renting it to somebody else or renting it to herself. Another example, we'll get to what you do in a second. Jennifer gets up to leave her job, like this one, gets up to leave her job on Friday and says, "My work here is finished."
Quit.
Notice how that interpretation jumps first to mind.
Yeah.
You could mean that she simply finished her weekly work and I'm ready to go crack a cold one. Or it could mean that I am finished, I'm not coming back to this place, I'm quitting. So at least two ways that we can interpret that as well. Kids make nutritious snacks. Minors refuse to work after death. So, things often, you're not aware sometimes when you say it, but it can be interpreted in more than one way. With respect to the minors, one minor dies in an accident and all the other minors refuse to work. That's the way to interpret it in a meaningful way. But in a more humorous way, you could say that after all the minors died, they also refused to work. So these are cases where a word or phrase is ambiguous. It can be interpreted as having one or more meaning. Here's an interesting example. A real case, Tim Russert used to do a great job with Meet the Press. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. And he is interviewing John Edwards. And he asks, "Why don't you support gay marriage?" Need another quotation mark there. Edwards answers, "Well, I guess it was the way I was raised." Very smart political answer there. Is Edwards offering an argument or an explanation?
Explanation.
Exactly. And the question is ambiguous. why don't you support gay marriage? That could either be asking for an argument to support your view, or an explanation to explain why you have that view. Now, if you're a politician trying to win an election who doesn't want to offend anybody, you're going to go for the explanation, because that will not be, disagreeing directly with the people who support gay rights. They can acknowledge that you were raised by a family that doesn't agree, and that might explain. But what they're really concerned about is your argument, and he's avoiding providing one. So the ambiguity is right here. And usually Tim Russert is very precise, and he follows up with questions. In this case, he gave the politician a way out. And Edwards offers an explanation rather than the argument. So the question here is ambiguous. Gay rights. For some, this is ambiguous, because some who oppose gay rights are going to say that we're giving special rights to protect the interests of this one group, and consequently they're going to oppose gay rights on this basis. Others will argue, hey, we're not asking for special rights. We are just trying to get the same rights that everybody else has. For example, the right to marriage, which is a big issue these days. For some, the term, phrase, gay rights, will be ambiguous. Now, what we're going to do with ambiguous cases is we are either going to change the words that we use, or we're going to add more. And how would we, for example, reduce the ambiguity in this sentence? Yes, sir?
So she's renting out her house.
She is renting out her house. One word added will enable us to distinguish between these two interpretations. When we say she's renting out the house, that means that she owns it and she's getting somebody else to pay the rent for it in order to live there. Very good. Very efficient way to reduce the ambiguity in that sentence. And often it'll only take one word, or altering a word, using a different word. So you don't have to add a whole paragraph often. One word can do it. And that very good, efficient writing is often finding the most efficient way to make your meaning clear. And that way you don't have to go on and on, like John Kerry, the Democratic candidate for president back in 2004. He was widely criticized for using 15 words when 2 would work. And it just killed everybody. Whoa, 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 whoa. And I think Jon Stewart made a joke about this. He shows this sailboat, yacht, that supposedly Kerry had, and the name on the back of it went for like 30 lines. So on and on and on. If you're trying to reduce ambiguity, often efficiency like that is what you're looking for. One word can actually clarify the sentence. Okay, ambiguity. We're also concerned about what we call semantic ambiguity. Semantic ambiguity is when a claim is ambiguous because of an ambiguous word or phrase. Now, there's going to be different cases of ambiguity. One is going to be structural due to the nature of the way a sentence is constructed. This kind of semantic ambiguity is going to depend on a word or phrase. Can be corrected by substituting a phrase or word that is not ambiguous. Let's see an example. I apologize for the football examples. But McFadden is a running back now for the Oakland Raiders, I believe. And if we say McFadden always lines up on the right side, how can that be interpreted in at least 2 ways?
Is it Republican?
I wasn't even thinking of that one. That's 3. Very good. Yes, sir.
Like the correct side, or literally on the right side, like left, right side.
Okay, so first, McFadden always lines up on the right side of the formation.
Yeah.
Number 1. Number 2, McFadden always lines up on the correct side according to the play. And he's smart in that sense. He doesn't make mental errors. Number 3, on every issue, he lines up on the Republican side of the issue. Very good. You get the Buddha for the day. Nice work. So here is what we would call a sentence that is semantically ambiguous, excuse me. And how would we clean that up? Our writer over here, can you clean that up in less than 2 words?
2 words.
Well, let's say you have to pick an interpretation and phrase this in a way that specifies only that interpretation, not him being a Republican or the other ones.
So he always lines up correctly, or he always lines up on the right side of the field.
This guy's good, man. McFadden always lines up correctly. Could you interpret that as being Republican? I don't think so. Very good. Very good. This he's on a roll.
Excuse me, so how do you
Yes.
say then for the right side of the right side?
Just on the right side
Side of the field.
of the field.
Use that.
The formation would be better. McFadden always lines up on the right side of the formation. Not bad, huh? Yes, ma'am.
This,
Yes, sir.
this doesn't kind of, well, kind of, is there such things like cultural ambiguity?
Yes.
Like, I can't think of an example, I just feel like there would be.
How something would be interpreted differently in another culture.
Well, like, isn't thumbs up mean something like.
Be careful there.
Innocent,
Be
it's
careful.
innocent.
Yeah.
We're on video. I don't want you saying
Right,
that.
if
No,
you're
I-
saying if you ask Jill if you want to go on the walk, that walk is never ending. You're marrying her.
And I've heard that in, for example, Japanese cultures, just about every word that comes out of our mouth is interpreted as offensive. Yeah. And for example, they have this cultural thing about not saying no, and they'll have different ways in which you'll say no without saying no, and we'll just say no. Oh God, did you hear what he said? You know? So you're absolutely right. Often different cultures will interpret different words, phrases, or behaviors differently.
Georgetown and China got in that fight.
What's that?
So that's why Georgetown and China got in that basketball fight.
Boy, there's probably a lot of reasons for that. That was quite ugly.
A couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Basketball, match, international match turned into. They couldn't even finish the
They were
game.
full out.
Cleared the bench.
Yeah, I don't know, the China kid first had that.
At least 2 ways to interpret this one. Yes, sir. That's the first one that jumps to your mind. Not that she's just cold. I think we have some issues here.
Ice princess.
Ice, we don't need any. So how would we, I'm not even going to ask you how we clean that one up, because I'm afraid of how these guys will phrase it. But you can see how it can be interpreted in at least 2 ways. So I like this one. Aunt Delia never used glasses. What are at least 2 ways that you
Well,
chose?
spoke
Spoke
their
their mind?
Hmm?
No.
I didn't think of that one. I'm not clear on it yet.
Straight from
Good eyesight.
Good eyesight's one. The second one,
straight from the bottle.
straight from the bottle. She don't need a glass. Yeah, she never used eyeglasses, or she drinks from a bottle.
Or she just stumbles around bumping into.
How would we clean this up?
She just
On her
contacts.
face.
And Delia has contacts.
Although that would be adding more to the meaning. Aunt Delia never
To read.
never used glasses to read.
Never needed that.
Well, I was thinking that she could still drink while she's reading. Semantic ambiguity, another example. We are the religious right. 1, we are religious. 2, we are right. So here the play is between being right in terms of conservative and in terms of right in terms of correct.
A politician thought he's rocking.
Yeah. This is taken from the 80s, and the religious right was definitely ruling the roost. Now, another form of ambiguity comes about when it's not clear whether a word refers to a group collectively or to members of the group individually. Let's give you an example. Secretaries make more money than physicians. Now, how is this not correct?
Could be the secretary and president.
If you take secretaries individually, as individuals, a secretary is going to make much less money than a physician. How can you interpret this as being correct?
There are a lot more secretaries than physicians.
There you go. So if you take secretaries as a group, while they each make less than a physician, as a group they're going to make more because there's more of them. And so here the ambiguity comes in terms of how you're viewing secretaries and physicians, whether we're looking at them as individuals or as a group. Another example, lawnmowers make more air pollution than dirt bikes. Well, what's going to happen here is the same as with secretaries. If you take lawnmowers as a group, there's going to be more of them than dirt bikes. So collectively, they're going to put off more pollution. But individually, a motorbike is going to put off more pollution than an individual lawnmower. So the ambiguity is here how we're looking at this group. Are we looking at lawnmowers collectively, or are we looking at them individually and seeing on average whether they're putting off less pollution than dirt bikes? These would be examples of what we call grouping ambiguities. Another example. Who's the biggest tax increase in history? Well, the way in which you can interpret that, in which it's probably correct, is by looking at the tax increase in terms of the amount of revenue collectively it brings in. And since the relative value of the dollar has gone down over time, it's really not unusual that a tax increase now would be collectively larger than any in human history. But if we look at the tax increase in terms of its individual impact on citizens, it's going to be unusual if that's going to be the biggest tax increase in history. So once again, it's a case of grouping ambiguity. You don't know whether you're looking at the group collectively and taking the total revenue, or whether you're looking at each member of the group and taking some kind of average. Another grouping ambiguity, and I'll apologize for the football examples once again, but here another form of grouping ambiguity is what we call a fallacy of division. And here we see that a certain group has a certain characteristic. And the fallacy of division is when we unjustifiably assume that every member of that group has that same quality. Fallacy of division. For example, the 1973 Miami Dolphins were undefeated. They did not lose a game. They won the Super Bowl.
72.
I think they won in 72, and in 73 they were undefeated. But I'll check. They won two. They won plenty of Super Bowls. So here, the idea is, as a team, they were spectacular. But however, is that the same as saying that Zonka was the best fullback? That's the running back. Mercury Morris was the best tailback, and Bob Greasy was the best quarterback.
Bob Greasy.
Way back, going old school, I know. But here, once again, the point is that the team is better than the other teams. But does that mean that each player is better at their position? No, that's not the case. And if we assume just because the team is better than other teams, that means that the players are better at their position than other players, that's what we call a fallacy of division. It's unjustifiably assuming that a characteristic of the group also applies to all the members of the group.
72. They were perfect season.
Really? Did they win in 73? Don't worry about it. It's like totally not important.
Actually, yeah,
Unusual.
72 was a perfect season. I'll check 72.
Because I actually was around and watched. I'm embarrassed to say. Fallacy of composition. Now, who's smart enough to figure this one out without me explaining? Yes, sir.
Just because one group of people did it one way, that someone similar, a group similar, will do it the exact same. Like
Not
it's-
very close. No. I think we could do it more clearly. Yes, sir? What's that? Somebody else?
Composition? Are you saying about the color? Like,
We're doing the opposite of what we do with the fallacy of division. So the opposite of the fallacy of division would be called the fallacy of composition. So how would the fallacy work here? And don't look at this example. Yes, sir?
Just because they have the best players doesn't mean they're the best team.
Exactly, exactly. Just because the individuals in the group are best at their position doesn't mean that the team is best. And here, the example I'm going to use is the Miami Heat with their trifecta of superstars. People are assuming they're going to win the NBA Finals. They came quite close. But it is definitely not the case that if the players are better at their position, that doesn't mean that the team is better than other teams. And many will argue that you need a team that works together effectively in order to be the best team. And the Miami Heat didn't quite do that. So the fallacy of composition is when you unjustifiably assume that just because the individual members of a group have a particular quality, that that group has that quality as well. Now, these examples don't help at all, I guess. I apologize.
So would it be like, I guess I can't think of an example like outside sports. Like,
That's our problem.
would it be like if a business has,
Yeah, if IBM, well, this would be the
Yeah,
fallacy of
working.
division.
Yeah.
If IBM's the best company, that doesn't mean that all the individuals at IBM are better than the individuals at another company.
They won the next year too. The Super Bowl.
I can't believe I confused the perfect season. That's it. Mark,
They only had 2 losses the next year.
2 losses. I like these. Well, this is a bit intricate. This is what we call syntactic ambiguity. And that's when the ambiguity of a phrase has to do with the way that it is structured. So consider this example. To travel in Canada, you will need a birth certificate or a driver's license and other photo ID. What the heck is being laid out here? There's at least 2 ways that you can interpret this sentence. Number 1, you can hold that to travel in Canada, you will need a birth certificate or a driver's license, and whether you use either of those, you will also need a photo ID. Or you can interpret it as saying you will need a birth certificate or a driver's license and a photo ID. And given the way this sentence is written right now, you can't really distinguish between these 2 interpretations. Now we can clear this up. We can either say you will need either a birth certificate or a driver's license and you will also need an additional photo ID. Or we can say you will need either a birth certificate or both a driver's license and an additional photo ID. But here, as we say it right here, it is not clear which way. And this has to do with the structure of the sentence. Syntactic ambiguity.
Yeah, you have to vote them because.
Yes. And probably wait in line and then get up there and you have the wrong paperwork.
Is it implying that, like, if you're driving in Canada?
What's that now?
If you're driving in Canada, you would need a driver's license?
Traveling or driving, yeah. I think that's what
But in reality, you just need a passport.
well, maybe you need a driver's
You can
license.
get to Canada without a passport.
It's North
You
America.
used to be able to, I think.
I got into Canada and I'm brown without a passport.
If he did it, anybody can. Question, yes?
Can you have syntactic ambiguity because of punctuation?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And often you can clarify syntactic ambiguity by adding the appropriate punctuation. Very good point. Very good point. So it looks like we're out of time for the day. We'll pick it up again on Thursday. Stay dry. Hey, turn us off.